Hello and welcome to another episode of the CPMC podcast. I am MC, as always, joined by CP. Chris, what's going on?
Not a whole lot, Matt. Ready to get going tonight. I'm excited here. We got another little TOB, Jazz Diaz, Get Some, Steve P, all our guys that we know here in this league, and it looks like a good one. It should be fun to dissect as we go through it tonight.
Yeah, talk to me about the scoring here, Chris. You were the one who went through and did the rankings here.
Yeah.
So got some added things in here in terms of scoring. How did it play a factor?
Sure. Yeah, so we've got quarter point per carry for running backs and quarterbacks. We've got half PPR for running backs, one PPR for wide receivers, and two PPR for tight ends. Okay, so we've got that factoring in a little bit. As I went through the ranks, though, you sort of realize that you've got three really good teams, three not so good teams that are like clearly rebuilding, and then a whole mess in the middle of about six teams that really are honestly quite the same. And the scoring differences in the league didn't really play a whole lot of factors in my rankings just because of sort of the natural way the rankings played out. And I think this league's been going a few years now, and so you kind of expect that with leagues that are going a few years. You have the top, the bottom, and that large middle class kind of trying to get to the top. And that's very much played out here in this league.
All right, looking forward to taking a look at this thing. For our new listeners out there, we're going to break this down into two different shows. The first show is going to run 12 through 7, where we're going to rank where we believe everyone's going to finish in this upcoming season. Of course, we'll always mention moves that we think this team should do, whether to go after a title this year, help them with the rebuild, suggest some things that the draft might look for them. Who knows where the show is going to take us? Let's start with our number 12 team here, Chris. And we've got no digs. No digs sitting here as our number 12 team. Let's see what we got. We got Pickett at the quarterback spot, James Cook, Jamar Chase, Jacoby Myers, Gerald Everett, Zach Moss, Michael Carter. Got Minshew at the current superflex spot. Could be Desmond Ritter once things get going. Damian Harris out there in Buffalo. I wonder if that's going to be an interesting play this year. We got Jamison Williams down here, Chase Claypool, Irv Smith, Chris, ends up in Cincinnati. That's a new development since our last podcast. I wonder if we start to factor him a little bit more now that he's got a home. Rashad Penny as well. Brees Hall sitting here on injured reserve. I said Irv Smith. Trey Lance, the other guy that I wanted to mention. So injured reserve is loaded with talent. The Kyle Trask experiment lasted all of, I think, like 3.5 days before he was supplanted as the heir apparent. So he's got pick 12 in this year's draft. So he clearly traded his away last year. Chris, this team isn't bad.
Yeah, listen, we're going to see two teams ahead of them, I think, that clearly make up this bottom tier for me. I just don't think we know anything about his quarterback situation here. We've got Kenny Pickett, we've got Desmond Ritter, we've got Trey Lance. Do you trust any of them? I can't trust any of them. And what really gets me here on this with this team is, he gave away his first, and you see his draft position is number one. So this was the bottom team last year, and he gave away his pick. He has 112. And this team just scares the bejesus out of me. I just aside from Chase and maybe Brees Hall, I don't trust a single asset on this team to be relevant. And it scares me with this team because he gave up his number one pick, which could have been a huge boon to this team to try and recoup assets. I don't think it's just down in the dirt, but I am terrified of this team. I could see this team just really tanking if these bubble guys, this Jamison Williams, Trey Lance, Rashad Bateman, Brees Hall coming off the injury. If these guys don't produce, where are the points coming from, Matt?
Yeah, you make a good point. I think it looked a little bit stronger at first glance, but when you break it down and really what we're going to be comparing it to with the rest of the league, this league's not going to play overly deep, right? It's a 12-teamer. We're starting 9. We're only starting 2 wide receivers. So I know that what we're going to see from the rest of the teams is going to be, better than what we see right here. And you're absolutely right. I think the floor for this team is dead last, but I also don't think that the upside, the ceiling for this team is much higher than 8 or 9 or something. So I could see why I have them last year. Jamar Chase and Brees Hall. I mean, those are 2 top 15 picks. It seems pretty consistently in a lot of drafts. But after that, you're absolutely right here, Chris. James Cook, things look a little bit, unsettled out there as well. Jacoby Myers with a new home in Vegas. He's going to be playing second fiddle, no more being the number one on his team. Gerald Everett, just guys like that. So I'm with you here, Chris. I think it's going to be okay. I think he'll battle to get out of the bottom, but I can't see it being any better than like eighth.
Yeah, it's really tough, especially if these quarterbacks don't help him. I mean, he's got Gardner Minshew here. Maybe he sticks in Indy. Trey Lance. God, the press is just not good on Trey Lance. That said, I think he's a nice buy. If you can get him at a discount, I think he's a nice buy. But man, that's the trouble with this team is I don't know where the production's coming from, especially from that quarterback position.
Yeah, and in terms of trades too, Chris, very quickly touching on that. I mean, I think Rashad Penny might be the only guy I would consider moving here. Maybe Brees Hall if you can get a haul for him. But it's relatively young, and I just don't think you're getting a whole lot for guys like Jacoby Myers, Gerald Everett. So I think you're gonna have to stick and play with this team. I'd love to find a way to get a little bit worse to improve my pick next year. But it's not great. So getting worse is going to be difficult. Let's see what we have next here, Chris. Let's go to Get Some as our number 11 team here. We've got Get Some sitting here at number 11. Looking at Bailey Zappi as his quarterback here. Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, Debo, Calvin Ridley, guys on the bench. He's got Jonathan Taylor that's worth a mention. Nicole Hardman may be worth a mention. Sheesh, not a whole lot else down here. Injured reserve, nothing. Squad's got Freiermuth, Rashad White, Pickens. Those are going to be players. Okay, here's where he's going to make his money. He's got 101, 102, and 103 in this draft class here. 202 as well, then a slew of 3s and 4s. Loaded up next year in his 2024 firsts and seconds as well. Love where this team is headed here, Chris, but it's just not going to happen this year. Yeah, you're right. He's in a class with the last team that we just saw.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you want to put the team, you want to put no digs ahead of this team. I'm fine with it. I'm just my my thought process in putting Get Some at 11 ahead of no digs was that I think I can bank on Get Some having 2 quarterbacks more than I can bank on no digs having 2 quarterbacks. So I think, 102, 101, 102, 103, we're looking at, and I mean, it would take some sort of insanity in the NFL draft for 102, 101, 102, 103 to not be Bijan Robinson, CJ Stroud, and Bryce Young, right? So, I mean, those are our 3 101, 102, 103. Okay. So we're going to plug those guys in the lineup and they're going to score points, right? So I'm sort of factoring that in my ranking. And I do think that, as crazy as it sounds, I think provides more reliable points than what we saw from No Dicks. But I mean, we're splitting hairs between these two. This is an unfinished team here from Get Some, but I think he's headed largely in the right direction. This is arrow up all the way. Plus, he's got these extra picks in 2024 as well. He's got two 2024 firsts to go with his own. I mean, this team to me is set up to be a real championship contender as soon as 2024, in my opinion. So I love where this team is headed. He's doing all the right things. Nail those picks this year. If those guys pan out, this team is the sky's the limit with this team. Could be a dynasty in the making.
Yeah, 2025, I think is going to get even stronger once he's able to draft in that 2024 class. This lineup could look like CJ Stroud, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf. We got to put something here at tight end. Debo, Calvin Ridley, and who didn't I say? Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, the other one.
Yeah.
Right. And then suddenly we're in really, really good shape. Can we get something from Jelani Woods?
He's got Freiermuth too. He's got
That's right.
Freiermuth
He's
here.
got Freiermuth down there. He's got Rashad White, George Pickens. So it could be a playoff team this year, Chris. It really could be.
I mean, I think that's a stretch. I would not rank him as such. I mean, it's just hard to, we're going to rank based on what he has, you know, but I agree with you. I think this team is going to be extremely difficult to deal with, depending on the development of the QBs listen, Bijan Robinson is going to be a slam dunk. But it depends on the development of the QBs. I don't think he's got the depth here at QB to really to be a factor in the playoffs. But this is not a team I'm going to be want to be facing, week 10 or so, after these QBs have taken their lumps and gotten acclimated to the league.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to be a very scary team, but you're absolutely right. 2024, 2025, just cut the guy the check immediately. He's going to have that type of a team. All right, Chris, let's head to our number 10 team, Bob McRobertson, or Bob McBobertson at number 10. We've got Justin Fields, Ramondre Stevenson, Al Jair, Watson, Amon Ra, Hayden Hurst, Marquise Brown, Kenneth Walker. We've currently got Tyler Lockett in the super flex spot. Other guys worth a mention here on this team, Jahan Dotson, Dobbs. That's about it. Injured reserve Kyle Pitts and Rondale Moore going to be nice to slide into this lineup at some point. Taxi squad's got nothing worth mentioning. He's got 104 and then, a few twos, a couple threes. He's got an extra first next year. Oh man, Chris.
Two extra firsts next year.
Two extra first next year. So he's sitting in a nice little spot here. Um, I think the arrow's pointing up for this team as well. Not quite like Get Some's team. But I think your ranking is fine. I think these guys all belong in the same class together. It's looking like 104 may produce a quarterback for him. So this rise of Anthony Richardson's really going to be a big winner for Mr. McBobertson here.
Yeah, I think it's huge, right? I mean, you pair two elite athletes at quarterback in Fields and Anthony Richardson, and I think we're in a good spot here. I think it's going to be a lot of growing pains, though, if he does end up going that route with Richardson. So you're going to have to be patient here. It's unfortunate Zach Wilson didn't work out for him because otherwise I think we'd be looking at, just a really solid young team, right? Missing some RB help. Decent depth here as well. So it's unfortunate he kind of missed on Zach Wilson. A lot of people did, to be fair. So, you'll be able to hopefully supplement that with Richardson this season. But I think it's a good young team. I just don't think it's ready to win. I think we're going to give it a year and see what's happening. I just, as the season goes along, don't be afraid to pivot off some guys that maybe you don't like a Hollywood Brown. Maybe, you feel the need to sell high on him or, Kenneth Walker even. I think, he's fetching a high price, I think, for me personally. I would not be afraid to move off Kenneth Walker at his price. Just I don't think he's going to be the long-term asset that people think. Just something to keep in mind. But I mean, this is a team that just stands pat, sticks with his young guys, builds through the draft here this year and next year. And again, I think, we'll see if this guy can start to compete, next year as he adds in these draft picks and just kind of just goes along with the plan he's got in place. I think he's got a great plan in place. It's going well as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think his success this year is going to rise and fall with these three running backs here that he's got in the starting lineup. Kenneth Walker, Al Jair, and Ramondre Stevenson. I think Kenneth Walker's pretty set in a role this year. I feel confident in that. I think your comment about his long-term usage is fair. But I think as far as this year goes, I don't see them adding much of a threat in the draft. So I think he's fine. I can't say the same thing for Stevenson and Al Jair. I think both of those teams find a way to add something of a playmaker that could take some carries away from them and some touches. But listen, if those guys can hang on to like a 65, 70% touch share this year, I think that's going to tell a completely different story for this team. And then, Anthony Richardson, if that's his guy at 104, and it's very likely to be that. What's he going to give us? Is he going to be as elite as people are saying right now, or is he going to be a dud like the other people are saying right now? It's really too close to tell, I think, right now. But listen, it's young. You said it perfectly here, Chris. It's heading in the right direction. Would you make what would you do with Tyler Lockett? He seems like the guy who stands out on this team as a guy who can go.
I mean, what are you going to get for him, though? I mean, that's the thing. You can get a second, a late second from a contender. I mean, I'd probably just hold at that price. I'm not sure I want that, you know. I guess if I could package him with something to get a better asset, that's what I would do. Otherwise, I'm just going to hold on to him. Let him, let him score some points for me. Maybe I can sell high at a later date.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think if I could get a second for him, I don't know if he's even fetching a second right now, which is the
Really?
scary part.
Ugh.
I haven't seen him move at all. Listen, I'd pay a late second for him, I think, if I was a contender this year.
Yeah, I do that all day. Same here.
All right, let's get to our number. What are we on, Chris? Nine here. We've got Cowboys for it all. We've got Dak Prescott, Najee Harris, James Conner, Amari Cooper, Juju, Dalton Schultz, Christian Kirk. We've currently got David Montgomery down there. We'll see what happens with him. Danny Dimes at the super flex spot. What do we got on the bench here, Chris? James Robinson. He's an interesting play, I think, out in New England. Brian Robinson, Adam Thielen, the corpse of Kenny Galladay resides here. Michael Gallup, Devin Duvernay, Cade Otton. He's the guy out there in Tampa right now at tight end. Nothing on injured reserve. Taxi squad's got nothing. He's got pick 5. He's got pick 10, 201, 205, 206. So he's going to get some help in the draft. No first next year, Chris. That's an ouchie, as they say in elementary school. I can see that we've taken a step forward. I think we've actually got a complete roster here. We're not really hoping for much. It's there. The production is there, but it just is a severe lack of top end talent. No?
That's exactly right. I mean, I think we've jumped up a tier pretty clearly. I think you can see a scenario where this team makes the playoffs as a 5-6 seed. I think that's in his range of outcomes. But I think you nailed it here that his lack of top end talent is really what's going to keep him from being, a title contender. He does have 105, he does have 107. He's got 3 seconds as well. So he's going to add some talent to this team. I mean, 105 could be the wide receiver one, right? In this draft, whoever that turns out to be. 107 could be the RB2, whoever that turns out to be. And all of a sudden, we've got some pretty decent talent on this team, to carry him forward this year. I Again though, is it elite talent? No, probably not. And you've got some holes in the lineup as well with Juju Smith-Schuster. Christian Kirk's going to be fighting for targets this year. David Montgomery, probably not a guy you're going to want in there every week, but maybe James Robinson fills that role. Who knows? Yeah, I mean it's a good team. I think it's a team that's going to fight for the playoffs. I really do. But I think in the end, I have a hard time seeing this team, being a title contender, and that's why I've got them down here at 9.
Yeah, that's fair. And what I'm afraid of for this team, Chris, is that it just kind of hangs in that 7 to 8 spot, which is a spot that you really just don't want to be when it comes to dynasty. So I think there's plenty of guys that were fine with getting off of here. And I'm looking at Najee Harris, James Conner. Harris is still a guy that's going to fetch a decent amount in return. I would even get off of Dak. Guys like that, David Montgomery, see what I can get for him. When the DeAndre Swift injury inevitably happens this year, and he's the guy, Dalton Schultz, Christian Kirk. I think these are guys that I could probably sell higher on and get rid of. Adam Thielen as well. I think I go in the complete rebuild with this team, Chris, because I just, like you said, I don't see it cutting down the nets. I don't really even see it as a semifinalist, but it's
It's
just
a,
going to kind of hang in that area.
it's just such a tough spot because it's one of those teams where I want to see what I get at 105 or 107. If you get a running back here, the running back two, who lands in a plush spot, all of a sudden this lineup looks a heck of a lot better, right? And maybe you do have that superstar talent in that rookie running back. And then the 107, if that turns out to be, your wide receiver one, or vice versa, however I said that. But if you end up with the wide receiver one in the class who ends up in a really good spot, and the running back two in this class who ends up in a really good spot, all of a sudden, you may have some production. So I'm not opposed to your idea. I think maybe this is a team where you just kind of wait and see, though. Give it 3, 4 weeks, see how you're producing. and just kind of go from there. I'm hesitant to make any large scale changes with this team just because I do think it is talented enough to make the playoffs, and we've seen worse teams cut down the nets. That's for sure.
That is for very sure, but that's rather fluky. But I think that's really good advice, Chris. I think, we always like to say stick it out for 4 or 5 weeks and then see what happens. And you're right. Maybe those two guys are studs right from the gate. But man, that's kind of a fun prospect for him to think about of possibly getting, RB2 and wide receiver one in this whole thing, or wide receiver one, wide receiver two. Could be really exciting for this team. All right, Chris, let's get to our number 8 team. We've got low expectations. Low expectations is our number 8 ranking here. Looking at a lineup of Jalen Hurts, Pacheco, Cam Akers, AJ Brown, DJ Moore, Noah Fant, Devin Singletary, Brandon Ayuk, and Matthew Stafford. On the bench, we've got Baker Mayfield, Edwards-Helaire. We'll see what happens with him. Let's see who else is worth mentioning. Tyler Boyd, Kadarius Toney, Khalil Shakir, Dawson Knox, Okonkwo. Taxi Squad's got absolutely nothing. He's got pick 8 in the draft, 208 as well. Oh man, Chris. We've got some holes here. I think that's kind of clear. I like this team though, Chris. I think this is a step up. Again, I think your rankings have been spot on so far. I think this team is above what we just saw for sure.
I think the starting lineup is quite good. I mean, what do the only thing I'm really worried about in the starting lineup here is Devin Singletary, basically. And I mean, he may see a fair share of the work in Houston. Cam Akers is obviously a question mark, but the wide receivers look good. The quarterbacks look good. I'm fine with Pacheco. We've got our third quarterback here in Baker Mayfield. I think he's going to be fine, honestly. I don't think he's going to kill you. You've got Kadarius Toney for a little bit of depth. We've got 108 as well, which should be a quality pick. So, it's not a bad team. I think it lacks the depth. I think similar to our last team, I think it just doesn't have that elite stud player. But in terms of, outside of Jalen Hurts, obviously, who can win you weeks. But, I mean, I think it's a quality team. I just don't think it's an elite team either. But it's a good young team. I think that's going to fight for a playoff spot. I mean, we're splitting hairs here between this team, the last team, and our next few teams. So I think it's all very close here. I think they're very similar builds. But this is a good young team. I think that could be, if things break right, I think could find himself in the semifinals. I do, just due to the upside of Jalen Hurts, the Jalen Hurts AJ Brown stack, I think is too strong to kind of ignore here. I have them outside the playoffs now, but I would not be shocked if this team made the playoffs and even won a game there.
Yeah, Chris, it's Cam Akers for me that's going to be the X factor. If this team gets a good, strong Cam Akers who's getting a really, really strong workload, I really like this team to find its way into the playoffs. I don't have high hopes for Devin Singletary. I wonder if that's a Kadarius Toney substitution in. Brandon Ayuk is secretly scaring me a little bit this offseason as well, Chris. I think once Debo is healthy, Christian McCaffrey is going to get the ball a ton. I just wonder if Brandon Ayuk is going to end up being the odd man out. I know Debo seemed to be the odd man out down the stretch, with Purdy behind center. I wonder if it's going to be Brandon Ayuk once Debo really gets going. So, that concern is obviously there. Noah Fant is a concern for me as well. I know he's got the god Okonkwo sitting there on the bench to help him out, but it's not overly deep here, Chris. So again, I think your ranking is perfect, but if Cam Akers is just firing on all cylinders, I could easily see this team getting into the playoffs. Or if 108 turns out to be a player that can really start contributing right away, which is certainly possible too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a large range of outcomes with this team. I really do. It's a quality team. I think he's got some things to work with. Yet again, I mean, I hate to go back to this, advice, but I think this is a team you just kind of sit, wait and see 5, 6 weeks, and make your move from there.
All right, Chris, our number 7 team and our final team for this show. I just gave it away by clicking on them. No more secrets on this podcast. I've got no Din Rogers at our number 7 ranking. No Din Rogers. We've got Josh Allen, Tony Pollard, AJ Dillon, T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, Juwan Johnson, Olave, Drake London, and Tua. Guys on the bench, Antonio Gibson, maybe worth a mention here. Eli Mitchell, Javonte Williams, we'll see what's going on with him. Cooper Kupp's obviously going to find his way into this lineup. Cortland Sutton as well. Traylon Burks, Zach Ertz, Mike Gesicki. Well, let's see what happens with him out in New England. Now they've got a trio of tight ends. Did Jonnu stay with New England? He hasn't moved anywhere, has he, Chris?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
I
Did
think
he stay in New England?
I think so. I can't remember. They probably should just cut him, but who knows? Let's see. Taxi Squad's got Nico Collins, an interesting play this year. A lot of people like him to be the guy who fills in for Brandon Cooks and sees a lot of targets. No first, second, or third in this draft. So what we see is what we get. I like this team a lot, Chris. I think we've taken another step forward. I could see this team winning the title.
Matt Jonnu Smith went to Atlanta, by the way. He went to
Wow,
Atlanta.
I missed that.
Yeah.
Not that that's really something important for us to miss, but a miss nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean that's not exactly huge news. He's behind Kyle Pitts. Great, thanks. Yeah, listen, I like this team as well. You know, I have this team slotted just outside the playoffs, right? Right now as 7, but basically because we're looking at Garrett Wilson with who the heck knows is his quarterback. I mean, we think it's going to be Rodgers, but who knows? Um, Olave and Drake London, right? We've got these 3 second-year wide receivers that we just don't know, right? We're hoping these guys continue to take that step forward. We hope that they, continue their productive path, but we just don't know, right? We've got Cooper Kupp and Javonte Williams coming off injury. We expect Kupp to be fine, but we don't know what to expect out of Javonte Williams. Traylon Burks, another second-year wide receiver. So I've got him just outside the playoffs, Matt. But man, I think if these second-year wide receivers really hit, if Javonte Williams gives him something at running back, this team I think could absolutely contend for a title. I think the upside is there to contend for a title with this team, but I think there's just enough unknowns right now for me to put him at 7. And we'll see the teams above him, and you can yell at me if I miss this one, but I think the unknowns for me were enough to keep him at 7 and just slightly out of the playoffs. But I fully acknowledge the upside is there for this team to make a finals and even win the finals if his guys hit their ceiling.
Yeah, the ceiling is unquestionably winning the title. But Chris, I think the running back position is where we have the most, I'm kind of holding my breath. I mean, we have Dylan, who's still, as far as we know, playing second fiddle to Aaron Jones. Tony Pollard, like a lot of people are forgetting, he's coming off a pretty gruesome injury that ended his season. And I think it was in the playoffs, correct?
Yes,
And then we've got,
unfortunately.
yes, very unfortunate for us Cowboys fans. Pour one out for another season for us. And then we've got Javonte Williams, who, again, another guy who's just not getting any type of positive press this entire offseason. Very, very scary situation in terms of dynasty owners and what they can expect from Javonte Williams. So for me, Chris, it's the running backs that really give me pause, that really say that he's a full go at the title. I think there's enough here to supplement it and keep him afloat. But I think you have him ranked kind of in the middle of where his ceiling and his floor is. I could see him finishing 9th if these running backs don't pan out and these wide receivers hit maybe a little bit of a sophomore slump. But listen, let's make this very clear. This team could win the title going away.
Yeah, I think one thing I would do with this team, if I had to give them one sort of piece of advice to make a trade here, I would move off one of these wide receivers that you maybe like the least. For me, it's probably Drake London, and I think he can still fetch a fair bit. I'd move off him and try and get an adequate running back equivalent here. I don't know who that is in terms of draft capital. Is it DeAndre Swift? Is it Josh Jacobs? I don't know what sort of range Drake London's falling in. He's just a guy we've completely avoided in all of our drafts, for better or worse. He seems to go higher, than we want to take him. So I think that would be the guy for me. I would look for an equivalent running back for just to kind of shore myself up a little bit, take some of my wide receiver capital, move it over to the running back position and really kind of solidify myself here, kind of balance out my roster a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think he's getting all the way to Josh Jacobs, Chris, but I do think two veteran names that could really benefit on this team. It doesn't really fit with his build as they're two aging guys, but a Dalvin Cook or a Derrick Henry. If both of those guys stay put, I really like their fits for this team. Immediate slot and play, and it could really put him in a good spot. I think those are two names that are in his range from the drafts that I've seen so far, that could really be a boost to this team.
Yeah, I think it's a great call. If you get either one, I think that that's just immediate production there to slot in that running back spot for him.
All right, Chris, that's it for part one of this show. We're going to see 6 through 1 on the other side. While you're taking your quick drink break, be sure to like and subscribe all the videos, and you're up to date on all the times when we do release a new video. So we'll see you guys on the flip side.